In this video we're going to look at building our first Visual Basic application using Visual Studio Community Edition 2013. You can see I've got this open at the moment, so we'll get straight into it and start by creating a new project. We're working with Visual Basic, so you should make sure that Visual Basic is selected up here as your template, and then it will be a Windows Forms application that we're going to make. It's important already now though to make sure that you give your application a name, and this will be my first program, so I'll just call it my first program. And you'll see that when the name is changed, the solution name for the project also changes. We've selected our location, which would be the default location from where you've installed. We can leave that as it is, and you'll notice that also create directory for solution is ticked there. This means that the program will be created in its own folder. So let's just check OK, and Visual Studio will start up and we get our default development environment for Visual Basic. On the left hand side we have got our toolbox. Now the toolbox may be docked across to the side here. If you were to click on that tab, you'd see the toolbox will open, and then you can pin it into the dialog. We'll be using common controls, things like buttons, checkboxes and so on. Not in this program perhaps, but later on as we use it. So we'll just show the common controls here. These are the controls that we drag onto our form. Now our form is where we place the controls that are going to make up our program. And across to the right of the screen we by default would have a Solution Explorer and then a Properties window. Now the properties relate to whichever control has been selected on the form. So as you can see at the moment, it is the form that's selected, so we can see the properties of Form 1 are visible here. Probably a good idea to make these alphabetical as you're learning, as it makes it easier to find the properties we'll be looking for. Okay, so that's the basics of the interactive design environment, or rather interactive development environment. Now the program that we're going to build is one that looks like this, not like that, like that. Taken from Adrian Jansen's book visualbasic.net for Education. What we have is two labels. A label that says Visual Basic Net Program 1, a second label, Welcome to visualbasic.net, and two buttons, a Start button and a Quit button. And the idea of this program is that when you click the Start button, this label here, which initially is invisible, will be made visible to the person running the program. If we click the Quit button, that will just complete the program. So let's go back to our development environment and we'll look at our form. To get controls onto the form, you can either just drag them across, and you'll see that we now have a label control, and you'll see here down in the properties window that it says label 1, and that is a label. Another way to put a control onto a form is just to double click on it, and you can see that immediately I double click, you'll get the second label onto the form. We need two buttons, so I'll just place one button here, and whenever you are using controls on a form that are going to be the same size, it's often a good idea just to make your first button the size that you want the buttons to be, and then you can right click, copy and paste, and you'll get a second button which is exactly the same size as the first. So now we need to work on our labels and our form heading and buttons to make them look like we wanted to, as you saw from the previous image of the form. First up, let's go to the form. We'll click on the form, just a single click, and that will highlight the form, and you can see here that we've got form 1 selected. And what we'd like to do here is just change that text so that it says Visual Basic.NET Program 1. That means changing the text property of the form, which at the moment says Form 1, and we'll change that to VB.NET Program 1. Oops, that didn't work quite well. Program 1. Caps lock. There we go. If we just click out of that, you'll see that the text on the heading of the form has now changed. For our first label, we want that to say Visual Basic.NET Program 1, and we'll change the size and so on of the font. So first thing we should always do when we're working with controls is give them names that we can use to refer to them when we're programming. And you'll see if you scroll to the top of your properties, I've selected label 1. You can see that its name is label 1. By convention, we'll use a prefix which identifies the type of control, label 1, and this will be message 1. You'll see as I move out of that field that there is actually no change to the label. This is the contents of the label, not the name of the label that we see here. If we want to change the contents, then we're going to need to change the text property of the label. And this is where we want it to say Visual Basic.NET Program 1. And we'll see there that we've got our label with the text in it. Now we want to make that label a bit bigger, but you can see that there is only one little drag handle on the corner which allows us to move it, but not to resize the label itself. So to do that, we have to set our auto size property, which is now true, auto size to fit the contents. We'll set that to true. You'll see you've got a drop down there. You can select false. Now we've got the drag handles around the control. We can change its size manually, make it a bit taller. I'll just drag label 2 out of the way for the moment. And we've got our text there. Second thing we want to do is we want to have a different background color on this control, so we can just look at the back color here. Again, you've got multiple colors to choose from. You can choose a custom color by selecting this way, or we can look at web colors, and if we were to scroll down here, we'd find a light blue. There we go, light blue. So our control has become light blue. Next, we want to center that text, align it to the center, both horizontally and vertically. So we'll look down to our text align property. By default, it's top left. On our drop down, we can see that we've got top left, bottom right, and so on. We want to put it right in the middle. Let's click on that, and you'll see that our text is now aligned to the center. While we're at it, we may as well change the font. So by default, it'll be a Microsoft Sans Serif. Let's change that to a Times. Start typing. Then select your font. We'll make it regular, but bump it up to size 14. OK. Now our text is wrapped in that label, so we'll just make that a little bit wider to fit it onto the screen there. Alright, so that covers our first label. We'll do a similar thing to the second label, and to keep this video short, I'll just pause this for a moment and come back when I've done it. Okay, back again. I've set up the properties for the label that's going to show our message. The if we select that label, you'll see that I've made the foreground color red, the font Times Roman. I've changed its name to label message 2, and the auto size is false. The back color is light blue, and there's one final thing that I need to do here. When the program starts, we don't want the user to see that label, so we're going to change its visible property to false, so that when the program runs, the label won't be seen. So that's done there. Now, you can still see it on the form in design when you're designing, but when the program runs, you'll find that that label doesn't show, and I can demonstrate that very quickly just by clicking the start button there. Drag that back into, drag that onto the form, and you can see that this is the program running. We can see our label here, but our second label, message 2, isn't visible on the form. So I'll just close that again. Right, now we need to work with our buttons, and I'll just line those up there and there. Button 1, we'll change its name to, following that convention, BTN start. It's going to start our program, and the text on the button we want it to be start, and clicking across to button 2, that will say quit, and we'll change its name to button quit, BTN quit. So there we go. Now our form actually looks like we want it to look, but we need to add our code that is going to change this invisible label to be visible, and when we click the quit button, that our program ends. So let's start by putting in our code for the start button. To bring up the code window, the shortcut for that is actually to double click on one of our controls. So if I double click on the start button, you'll see that we've now got what we call our code window, and up on the window here we've got two tabs. We've got our form, which is the code, and we've got the form, which is the design. So you can toggle between those two, code and design, back to code. And what also happened when we clicked on that button is that we've created a subroutine. It's a private sub. It is called button underscore click. It has some parameters. It has some parameters. And what this button is going to do is it is going to handle button start being clicked, the button start.click event. As you'd know, Visual Basic is an event-driven programming language, which means that it is the events that happen that cause code to be run. Now, in this case, our button start being clicked is going to change the visible property of our label message 2. So, how do we do that? Well, let's type the name of the label, and you can see that you get some assistance here from Visual Basic. It starts to find anything that has got the name that you're starting to type. So you can either use just a down arrow, a tab, and it will select the message 2 for you. And then the properties, we get to the properties by using what's called a dot notation, so full stop, and then we get the list of all of our properties that we could manipulate for that control, and there's a long list of them. These match the properties that you see in the properties dialog when you're in design view. So we're going to use visible, so we can start typing VI. It selects the visible property for us, tab to select it, and we're going to give it a value. Now this is a typical assignment statement that we use in programming, and we want it to equal And do we want it to equal true or false? We want it to be true, because when we click on the start button, we want the message to be visible, so we set its visible property to equal true. No change to the form, but now we've got some code behind the button. The second thing we want to do is add some code for the button quit being clicked, and we can do that two ways. We could go back to the form, double click on the button, and it would open up the or put in place a subroutine for us where we can add our code. But I'll just delete that for a minute to demonstrate the second way you could do this. We can go up to the drop downs here at the top of the code window. We've got form 1 there. If we drop down, you can see that we've got the controls on the form listed. So I could select button quit. So I've selected button quit. To the right hand side, we've then got all of the events that can happen to a button. Now, it's quite a daunting list, but the one that we're looking for is just to click. So if we select click, you'll see again the subroutine for that button being clicked. Just drag it across to the side there. This is handling button quit click. So what code do we want there? Well, in Visual Basic, whenever we want a program to end, we just use the end keyword and our program will end. So that's it for our program. We've got our form designed with two labels. This one, the second, has its visible property set to false when we start the program. Our start button will change that property to true when we click on the button, and our quit button will just end the program. Let's run to see how we go, and I'll just drag that across to the center of the screen. Okay, label 2 is invisible, so we can start, and there it goes. We've changed its visible property to true, so we can now see it. And then if we wish to end the program, we click quit, and the program's gone and control is given back to us in the development environment. Just a couple of things that could trip you up as you're working. When you have a program running, like this one here, you can't actually add any type into the code window at all. So you need to stop the program to be able to type into your code window. So you've got stop debugging here, so we can just click on that. It'll close the form, and now we could add extra code if we wish to do that. Alright, so that's your first program. By default, the program should save. If to be sure, use the save all control. Just click on that. If you've made a change to any of the code and you attempt to exit, as in file exit, you'll see that changes have been made. Do you want to save the changes? And you would always, well, normally you would say yes to that, and saying yes to that would actually close the development environment. And that's all for our first Visual Basic program.